On today's show, the end of Alex Ovechkin's career in the NHL is on the horizon.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, I talk about my first take on Anthony Beauvillier, the only player that the Capitals acquired at the trade deadline. Got off to a strong start in his career with the Islanders. A bit of a journeyman here as of late, but I think a good upside or at least a good depth move by the Capitals. What can we expect from him for the duration of the season? I'll talk about that a bit later. I'll talk about the great news surrounding Joe Beninati, as he will, in fact, be on the call when Alex Ovechkin makes history. There was a lot of questions surrounding Joe B. If it's a national broadcast, what is Joe B going to do? He has been there every step along the way with Alex Ovechkin. Great news surrounding Joe B and Alex Ovechkin. But just to get it going here, talking about the most recent comments coming from Alex Ovechkin as far as his career and his future in the NHL. Listen, we know that he is edging ever closer and closer to that historic milestone of catching and then passing Wayne Gretzky. And what else do we know is that he has 1 year left under contract after this season, and then he could very well ride out into the sunset as far as his time in the NHL. I guess he could always play one final season over in Russia, but it does appear that it is coming closer and closer. And, some people have talked about maybe he'll sign an extension. And a lot of that conversation was predicated on the fact that maybe he doesn't catch Gretzky under his current contract. Of course, what we have seen this season, as it has just been an arrow straight up to the moon, that he has been catching Gretzky, or edging closer and closer to Gretzky sooner than I think anyone thought. So is there any real purpose for him to sign a contract after his current contract? So that is what we will dive into in this first segment here, is talking about the history and the future of Alex Ovechkin. Kind of a strange moment for me as a Capitals fan. Is it, it seems like he's been in the league for a long time, but it doesn't seem like it's been that long that we're talking about the fact that he very well could hang up the skates after the end of next season. Crazy times, but he will leave behind quite a legacy as one of the greatest to ever do it. He will be the greatest goal scorer, but one of the greatest hockey players, period. So let's dive into that in this first segment here. Ovi, if you can believe it, is just 9 goals away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's all-time record. And the thing of it is with 18 games left in the 24-25 season, I think it's going to happen sooner than later. And, it's interesting, the predictions and the projections and all those kind of things have kind of been all over the place, because all of a sudden, he'll slow down a bit, but then he'll score a hat trick or score 2 goals, that it's hard to put a target on when he'll do it. But it does appear that it could be in the latter part of this month or the very beginning of April. That would be an incredible thing to witness as a Capitals fan. But ultimately, a lot of uncertainty after the 25-26 season. If he doesn't manage to reach that milestone this season, he will still have 1 more year left on his contract to do it. Again, he's 39. He'll be 40 next season. I don't think he wants to enter into Jaromir Jagr status of just kind of really beating a dead horse, if you will. But Ovechkin has been candid about his uncertainty regarding his career beyond the 25-26 season. In a recent interview with Igor Rabinir from Sports Express, he hinted that this might be his last year or his last seasons, if you will, with the Capitals. That, I guess there's a potential possibility that he could even, in fact, hang it up at the end of this season. I ultimately don't think That'll be the case. I think he will play out to the duration of his current contract, but I would be very surprised if there is any extension in his future. When he was asked about the possibility of breaking Gretzky's record and finishing his career in Washington, Ovi stated, quote, "I don't think so." There's been all kinds of rumors out there about what will happen. I've heard crazy rumors that maybe he will retire the game after that he passes Wayne Gretzky. That I did it. I did the unthinkable thing, and now I'm just going to ride up out into the sunset with my family. The sunset being Russia, of course. I don't think that'll be the case. I think he will play this season, and I think that ultimately he will honor his commitment to play with the Capitals next season as well. But like I talked about in this segment is the possibility of returning to Dynamo Moscow, where it all started for the Great Eight. And I think that would be a good bookend on his career, that he started playing with Dynamo, had this great career in the NHL. And how about end it with Dynamo as well? Now, as he approaches his 40th birthday in September, Ovechkin has shared a desire to conclude his pro career back in his hometown of Dynamo Moscow. When asked about this plan, he mentioned, quote, "Most likely, yes, to Dynamo if health allows. It's hard to plan for such a long term now," unquote. And there's a lot of uncertainty, that he faced that injury this season. And, everyone talks about that he would have already caught and passed Wayne Gretzky had it not been for that. But, that's I guess what I'm trying to exemplify there is the uncertainty of life. We don't know what lies behind door number 2. Is there another injury that he could face? Maybe a serious injury that would derail it. Think of Nick Backstrom, or more of a degenerative condition like TJ Oshie. So there's a lot of balls in the air with as far as his career and about playing in the KHL. Dynamo's Moscow's president has expressed interest in negotiating with Ovi since his NHL, or when his NHL contract expires, citing Ovechkin's roots in the organization, including the time at their hockey academy. And it's unfortunate that there's this political stuff going on between America and Russia, and I'm not going to get into that, but it would be good if at some point there was more peace between the two countries, I guess what I'm trying to say. But fond memories with Dynamo. Currently, Ovechkin serves as the advisor for Dynamo, and fans may remember he played there during the 2012-2013 NHL lockout, helping the team alongside Nick Backstrom and the other players that participated to win the cup over there as well. But what a memorable time that was for both players in that time during the lockout. A lot of uncertainty around the NHL in general. But just already kind of being retrospective, or, taking a look back on what Alex Ovechkin has accomplished so far. Ovechkin's current deal with the Capitals is a 5-year agreement worth $47.5 million. And you take a look at it over his career with the Caps, he has amassed an impressive 1,600 points with 1,474 games, making him the franchise leader in games played, goals, and points. Now, why that is quite an expensive contract, 5-year, $47.5 million, considering what players are making nowadays, it seems like an absolute bargain. But for a vision for a farewell game in an interview, Ovechkin also shared a visionary idea for a farewell game featuring Dynamo Moscow against the Capitals, dependent on the global climate. He optimistically said, quote, "If the world situation allows, we will think about it," unquote. Wouldn't that be truly a great moment? Dynamo Moscow taking on the Capitals. I don't see that being a possibility, but what I've noticed about the Capitals and what they're able to pull together, I don't think anything is impossible. I guess I'm just going to chalk it up as improbable. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the great news surrounding our favorite Capitals broadcaster, Joe Beninati, as he will, in fact, be on the call when Alex Ovechkin has that historic night, or historic nights, when he catches and passes Wayne Gretzky. I'll talk about the latest straight ahead. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Now, this is an exciting time for me as a basketball fan. I loves me some March Madness, and I especially love it with FanDuel. Put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, these games got way much more exciting. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoop action all tournament long. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So the big news coming out today is that Joe Beninati, the beloved Joe B, will be on the call regardless of if it's a national broadcast. And is Ted Leonsis, is he listening to me somewhere out there? This podcast, if you are an everydayer of the show, you know I brought up that it was my fever dream. It was a crazy dream to think that somehow, some way, Ted Leonsis would be able to pull the strings to get Joe B to be on the call. I referenced that he was able to buy cap friendly and how monumental and all the things that he's accomplished. Surely some of his qualified staff can pull it together that Joe B can be on the call. And what do you know? Joe B will, in fact, be on the call on that historic night when Alex Ovechkin reaches greatness. So let's dive into that in this next segment here. And truly a feel-good story surrounding Joe B and the Capitals. So now with Alex Ovechkin chasing down Gretzky, the all-time goals leader, of course, there's a buzz in the DC area. A big question for fans in mind is who will be calling the action for Ovi's potential goal number 895 if it happens this season. And, it did seem like it would be probable that it would be Joe B, but it very well could not have been, as everyone wants a part of the Alex Ovechkin action, or the Capitals action, if you will, that a lot of these national conglomerates, these national broadcasters wanted a piece of the action. And as a Capitals fan, you're thinking back like Joe B was there for Alex Ovechkin's first goal and all the milestones that between here and there, it only seemed fitting that he would be behind the mic when he reaches greatness. Now, well, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. We can confirm that Joe B will be in the mix along with color commentator Alan May. I guess it would be even better if it was Craig Laughlin out of the Capitals' remaining 18 games. 4 will be broadcast exclusively on national channels, April 6th, April 10th, April 12th, and April 15th. So there is the possibility that Ovechkin could have done it during one of those dates. But interestingly, the game against the Blue Jackets was initially set for Monumental, but has since been switched to a national broadcast. That is not too surprising to me if you think about it, because well, like I say, everyone wants a part of the Alex Ovechkin action, and just an added bonus with how the Capitals have been playing. Now, this switch means that Monumental won't be able to provide a live stream featuring Beninati and May for those games. However, there's an exciting development. And if you're a fan of Joe B, and I assume you are, a recent agreement with the NHL allows Beninati and May, or perhaps Craig Laughlin, depending on his health recovery, to commentate for archival purposes. So if Ovechkin ties or breaks Gretzky's record during one of these exclusive broadcasts, Monumental plans to share their commentary on social media. And don't worry, the game will be available on Monumental just 24 hours later, with the broadcast team traveling with the Caps from away games. So exciting developments for the Capitals and Joe B that he will, in fact, be on the call. Now, Beninati shared his hopes for a timely record-breaking moment, saying, quote, "We want to be there. It feels incredible," unquote, to be involved even in a limited capacity. With nearly 3 decades of collaboration under his belt, he's thrilled about the possibility of Laughlin returning soon, though we're still waiting to hear more from his recovery timeline. And listen, if you do listen to NHL games at large, the local broadcasts, there are a lot of broadcasters, no, harm intended. I'm not using this, negatively, that aren't nearly on par with what Joe B brings to the Capitals. So a big accomplishment for the Capitals organization and a great tip of the hat to Joe B to say, hey, he's worth it. He's been there with Alex Ovechkin this whole way. Let's get it done. Now let's look at Ovechkin, who's had an impressive season this far, so far with 33 goals in 48 games. This guy is 39 years old and playing some of his best hockey in his entire career. Now, currently sitting at 886, just 9 shy away from breaking that record as the Capitals gear up for their next matchup. It'll be tonight against Anaheim. Projections suggest Ovi could reach that milestone around April 10th against the Hurricanes. Again, it is a moving target, back and forth because, one game he won't score a goal. The next game he could score a hat trick or 2 goals, that it's hard to pinpoint exactly when Alex Ovechkin will reach greatness. But the good news, like I talked about in this segment, is that, in fact, Joe B will be on the call. And if you can't be wherever the Capitals are playing on that particular night, hearing Joby on the call will be an extra special moment. All right, so coming up here after the break, I'll give you my first take, my projections for Anthony Beauvillier. What kind of player did they get? Was it worth it? I'll break it all down straight ahead. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast, easy? Just use Indeed instead. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored job puts your post at the top of the page and helps you find the right candidates fast. And that is the frustrating part. If you are involved in HR, the hiring and firing, I take part in that, and it's hard. Paper applications. Why not make your life that much easier and use Indeed? Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOn right now and support Locked On Capitals by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. The best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. All right, in this next segment here, we're talking Anthony Beauvillier, the only player that the Capitals traded for on the trade deadline. And listen, there was a lot of people out there saying it should have been this player, that player. Ratnin went out to the Stars and Marchand went out to the Panthers. Why did the Capitals do more? Well, what do the Capitals have that those teams don't? Well, the Capitals are tied for the most points in the NHL, or they were before I started recording this. And also, we know for sure the best in the Eastern Conference, and, well, more specifically, have the most points in the Metro Division. So I think there was the feeling that the Capitals didn't need to get too crazy. They went out and took care of what they needed to take care of. Logan Thompson, Charlie Lindgren under contract. We know that Ryan Leonard will be joining the team at some point once Boston College wraps up their playoff hopes there. So, the need wasn't there to go out and try to pursue a Rantanen or a Marchand. You take a look at the Panthers. Are the Panthers better now with a Marchand? Sure. Are the Stars better? But this Capitals team right here, right now is pretty good. And I think that Anthony Beauvillier is just a little bit of a sweetener on top of all of that. So let's dive into that in this final segment of the show. I'll weigh in on what he meant for Pittsburgh, what Spencer Carberry thinks about him, all of those kind of things. So the forward recently signed, Anthony Beauvillier, signed with the Capitals with a trade, of course, remember at the trade deadline. And, he had quite a responsibility playing in Pittsburgh as well. He had solid time playing alongside Sidney Crosby with the Penguins first line. So you take a look at that. Some people thought, I heard about this on social media with Anthony Beauvillier. It's a depth move. He probably won't even play. What have we seen happen here? At least in that first game that he played, is he played on the fourth line with Duhaime and Dowd, and ultimately, I think the right place for him to play. You take a look at the fourth line, in air quotes only, it is better than a lot of teams' top six, shall we say? But I think playing on that line serves him well. The unfortunate part, of course, is that it does appear that Ethan Frank will be the odd man out, at least for now. But just know that about Anthony Beauvillier is that he does have a pretty good upside, even though he has kind of bounced around the NHL here in the last handful of years, and still a fairly young man, all things considered. But let's talk about what we saw from him in the first game. Didn't really necessarily pop off the score sheet, got in some hits, but in his debut game against the Kraken, it looked like he would initially be slotted on the fourth line with Nick Dowd and Brandon Duhaime. And he was. He logged 10:55 of ice time and even recorded the Caps' first shot just 5 minutes into the game. So a good thing, getting a shot on net. Of course, would it have been, or it'd be better if he found the back of the net? Of course, but he is still getting, acclimated to the Capital systems. But talking about that trade detail, during that 2025 NHL trade deadline, GM Chris Patrick swooped in to acquire Beauvillier from Pittsburgh, giving up, a second-round draft pick in 2025. And one of the things that Chris Patrick said is that the Capitals, as far as Brian McClellan and Chris Patrick, they said that they've kind of had the eye on Anthony for quite some time, even before the trade deadline. So it wasn't some sort of consolation prize getting Anthony Beauvillier from Pittsburgh. And as far as the second-round pick, it was pretty much a third-round pick because it was a little bit later in the draft. Now, this trade, though, it was at the time, I think, tough to understand for some Capitals fans. I heard about it on social media. I think they were longing for some of those players that we heard, got moved out to Dallas and Florida, that why not? But the big thing was to fill a void on the team. We know that Jacob Vrana went out to the Nashville Predators, and I think that the Capitals were looking for more of a proven commodity. Now, Ethan Frank has been a good addition, but not proven. That's one of the things that Frank Saravalli said is battle-tested. How many players on the Capitals roster are battle-tested? So I think to a certain extent, they were looking for experience in Anthony Beauvillier. Now, remember, he netted 15 goals and contributed 14 assists over 49 playoff games with the Islanders, helping them make a memorable run to the Eastern Conference Finals. That's what I'm talking about. That is why the Capitals did what they did. And, again, it's what I've talked about in the show is it's important not to have favorites. And I think that, even though Ethan Frank hasn't played on the big team too long, that he is a bit of a fan favorite. They like that he's fast and this young guy working up through the system. But with Anthony Beauvillier, they have that experience, 49 playoff games that we know the Capitals will make it to the playoffs. I think that there is just more of a secure feeling, know that you have a guy that has put in those kind of hours on his hockey odometer in the playoffs. Now, in a recent first-round matchup against Nashville, Beauvillier, added a goal and an assist, showcasing his knack for stepping up when it counts. But like I said, how this impacts the lineup, his addition is especially welcome for bolstering the Capitals' bottom six offense. He plays primarily on the wing, has had some time playing at center, and this season we've seen Beauvillier play with more aggressiveness. He's been hunting down scoring chances, amassing 120 shots with a 10.8 shooting percentage. It's clear he's looking to make an impact. And, you talk about it, it's kind of in the same breath as Pierre-Luc Dubois. People talk about him like he's an old player. Like if you heard about PLD or Anthony Beauvillier, you'd swear that they were in their late 30s, ready to hang it up. Still, fairly young guys in the NHL and still ready to make an impact. And part, I think, of the thing that made it easier for Anthony coming to this team was familiarity. Talk about that. Beauvillier has connections with teammates like Lars Eller and Pierre-Luc Dubois from Quebec. His rapport with Dubois dates back to their time together at the 2018 World Championships, which adds an extra layer of familiarity to the locker room. And we've heard about that. We talked about when Pierre-Luc Dubois and Matt Roy came over together from the Kings, all the different Capitals players that have come here that have played with Dylan Strome at some point, that showing up to a locker room with a familiar face, I think, goes a long ways. Now, this was ultimately about a strategic fit as well. The Capitals have been focused on getting younger and faster players, but Beauvillier's journey moving from a reclamation project with the Pens to becoming a reliable right winger aligns perfectly with the Capitals' strategic goals. You can't be a team that is exclusively young. Take a look at the Sabres, for example, and how ill-fated that has been for that team. So, to pepper in some experience is a good thing. Now, last season was tough for him, to be clear, as he struggled with just 5 goals in 12 games, 12 assists over 9 games. Now, it seems that he has found his groove this year, scoring 13 goals and totaling 20 points in 63 games with the Pens. The big thing to underline here is the responsibility that was put on him is that he had some playing time playing with Sidney Crosby, one of the greatest scorers or greatest players to ever lace up the skates, that they don't just have any player play with a guy like Sidney Crosby. So you take a look at it, he has had a bit of ups and downs here as of late, but like I said, I think that ultimately they decided to go with a guy that was fairly cheap. And when I say cheap is they didn't have to give up a lot. They gave her up a second round pick in the 2025 draft. And ultimately, like what Chris Patrick said, is the Capitals could have been all in on some bigger marquee names. But what were they interested in? Some of the Capitals' young prospects. And what do we not want to do? We don't want to deplete the cupboard, if you will, for these rentals. You take a look at Brock Nelson and what the Capitals would have had to give up to get him. Ultimately, better that he went out to the Avalanche and let them do whatever they're going to do with their system. As far as the Capitals and what they've amassed, I am glad they decided not to move on from some of these key players that are going to be a part of the Capitals' future. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, where they have you covered NHL-wide 5 days a week. Available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.